All right, welcome back to the JFK Assassination Audit. This is video number 71. We're going to continue with Frazier's Follies on Frazier's testimony. Again, this is at the Clay Shaw trial in 1969, I believe. And we've got Frazier being questioned, cross-examined by Mr. Shaw's attorney, Mr. Demon. So he says, but when he came back to work in the morning, did he ever come to work in the morning looking dirty? No, sir, not that I can remember. Did you ever see him come to work in the morning looking anything but neat? No, not that I can remember. And see, that again, that tells you something. They're trying to figure out they're trying to discredit this witness that's going to be coming up later, Perry Russo, into saying that he saw Oswald dressed, scruffy with a beard, unkept, like a beatnik, at a party at David Ferry's, and then at the same party he saw Clay Bertrand, he's identified as Clay Shaw. So what they're trying to do is they're building with all these witnesses in the mind of the jury that Perry Russo is mistaken, that he didn't see Oswald because Oswald's always clean, shaven, and neat, and therefore if he didn't see Oswald, he probably didn't see Clay Shaw at David Ferry's party. That's the doubt they're trying to build, and it works, because the jury doesn't buy it. Anyway, so it says, Mr. Frazier, you know what I'm referring to when I refer to a beatnik type, don't you? Yes. Have you ever seen Oswald in the time that you knew him when you looked like a beatnik type? Now, speaking of beatniks, the pictures of Kerry Thornley, then and before and after, definitely has Kerry Thornley looking like a beatnik. Eventually he, changes that or modifies it into his hippie look. And it says, you mean like sloppy dress and the beard and so forth like that? That's right. No, not that I can remember. Now, Mr. Frazier, when did you first hear that President Kennedy was to visit Dallas? Would you repeat that again? When did you first learn that President Kennedy was to visit Dallas? Let's see, it says, like I said yesterday, previously, a couple of days before he was due to come through there and make a personal appearance, as far as the motorcade and so forth, I saw him in the newspapers. It was announced, and they announced the possible route. Now, when that happened, that is when you learned about it through the papers. How long had Lee Oswald been working at the school book depository? Like I said yesterday, he went to work somewhere around the middle of October, and that would be somewhere around the month he worked there, around a month. And I was just listening to the landlord on this really good video called Thou Shalt Not Kill, and they're interviewing the landlord of Oswald, and she said that he moved in on the 14th. And I know from what the other testimony is that he moved into the Beckley address, and then he got the job later that day when he went to the interview. So he must have started the job on the 14th. So it says, let's see, now when that happened, that is when you learned about it through the newspapers. How long? Yeah, okay, we got that part. Like I said yesterday, he went through there somewhere around the middle of the month of the 14th. And, you got to give him a break because it's, October of 1963, and now he's testifying in, February, March of 1969. So it's over 6 years later. All right, so let's see. What else we have here? Did you ever at any time see Oswald with a gun, Mr. Frazier? No, sir, I did not. You see, that's one thing I really, really have a hard time with, is because Frazier has a gun, a rifle, at his sister's house, and Oswald has a rifle and a pistol. And if I know one thing about Southern men, if they're not talking about, usually they're not talking about the weather and children and babies, okay? They're talking about men stuff. Hunting, fishing. What kind of rifle you got? Oh, you got a rifle. What kind of rifle you got? Do you shoot? How does it shoot? Do you go out and shoot much? What do you shoot with it? Squirrels? Deer? That's how men talk, especially Southern men. So for a whole month, all they talk about is the weather and babies. Okay. Anyway, had you ever met Mrs. Ruth Payne? You mean like, for instance, before the assassination? No, I never really had a personal acquaintance or anything with her, no. Do you know whether Lee Oswald's wife, Marina, was living with Mrs. Ruth Payne there in Irving, Texas? You mean prior to the assassination? Prior to the assassination, right. Yes, she was living there, and I learned that through my sister. Like I stated yesterday, some of the women in the neighborhood, they would get together in the afternoon of coffee and so forth, and like that. Mr. Alcott, I object to any hearsay, Your Honor. Mr. Demon, don't say what anybody told you. The court, he learned this from some source, and he knew it. The witness, that is right. Question by Mr. Demon, or Diamond. Do you know whether Lee Oswald had any children living there in Irving, Texas with his wife? He had one child. One child? Do you know whether his wife was pregnant or not, or did she appear pregnant? She was expecting a child at that time. I see. Now, did Lee Oswald ever tell you what was in the package that he carried with him in your automobile to the Texas School Book Depository? Well, that morning when he got into the car, I glanced over my shoulder and saw a package on the back seat. I asked him, I said, "What is in the package?" And he replied, "Curtain rods that I told you yesterday." And I said, "Oh yes," and that is all that was said about the package. Mr. Demon, that's all, sir? Mr. Alcock, no further questions. I ask him to be excused so that he can return to Dallas, Your Honor. The court, you're excused from your subpoena. You may return. All right, so this is a C-SPAN video of an interview with Buell Wesley Frazier on June 21st, 2002.
Buell Wesley Frazier worked with Lee Harvey Oswald at the Texas School Book Depository in Dallas at the time of President Kennedy's assassination. In this oral history recorded for the 6th Floor Museum at Dealey Plaza, Frazier recounts working with Oswald and Oswald's activities on the morning of November 22, 1963. This program is the first of two parts. The second half will air Sunday, August 16th. Check cspan.org for the C-SPAN 3 history schedule. This is 1 hour.
For me at Texas School Book Depository, I talked with Mr. Roy S. Truly, and he turned me over to his assistant, which was Bill Shelley.
Okay, and do you remember approximately when you started work at the depository?
I started there in the, my memory serves correctly, it was in the summer of 1963.
Can I jog your memory a little bit? Might have been in September?
Could have been.
Could have been.
I'm not for sure. Are you aware of what day I actually started there?
I remember September when because I read your Warren Commission testimony this morning, and I think you mentioned September, and I want to say it was around the 13th or the 15th of September. What's important though is you were living with your sister and her family, and this was probably what, a temporary arrangement or what?
Yes, it was a temporary arrangement. I was going to live there with them until I found employment and I could move out on my own.
Okay. And working in the depository, what was your job title and what kind of work did you do there?
Okay, being employed by the Texas School Book Depository, I was employed as an order filler. And what I did there, I filled orders from different publishers. And by the way, if you're not familiar with Texas School Book Depository, we had several different stories that we stored our textbooks on. Different publishers, say for instance like Greg, was located on the 5th floor, and then Scott's Foreman was located on the 6th floor, and I could go from any floor from the basement up to the top and pull the orders as needed. Now the depository book building at that time, there was some floors that was strictly for administration and clerical type work, and that started like on the 2nd floor. 2nd and 3rd and 4th floor, I believe, had offices on it at that time.
So when you and your coworkers got your orders for the day, you knew basically by the name of the publisher which floor to find those books on?
Yes, that is correct.
At some point after you got hired, you must have apparently became aware that there might still be some openings, and you must have mentioned that to your sister?
Well,
because she supposedly mentioned it to Ruth Payne, a friend of hers. Is that how you remember it?
Well, the way I remember it was that I was working quite a bit of overtime. Nearly every day we was working overtime. There would be some days that Mr. Shelley would give us a break. But my sister noticed that I was working a lot of overtime, and by the way, my sister's name was Miss Lenny Randall. She asked me, she said, are they doing any hiring? And I said, well, I don't know. I'll have to ask Mr. Shelley and see what he says. And so I asked Mr. Shelley, I said, are we doing any hiring? And he says, yes. He said, we're taking applications. So my sister used to meet with Ruth Payne and some of the women in the right there in the immediate neighborhood, and they would get together sometimes in the morning and they would have coffee, some type of coffee cake or whatever they had, and they would sit around and visit and drink coffee or tea.
So in the South, they called this a gossip circle, okay? So before the internet, before, chatting on cell phones and stuff like that, women would get together because the men went to work and the women were at home taking care of the children. So a lot of times, instead of being isolated in the house, a lot of the women would bring their children over to someone's house, another woman's house. They'd get together with some other women and they would play cards, drink coffee, eat coffee cake, and basically gossip about what's going on in the neighborhood, okay? And so this is the thing that I find almost impossible, because I know my mom was one of these types of persons, that, if you got a guy who went to the Soviet Union, defected, and then married a Russian woman and came back, and now he's separated from her, and she's living with Mrs. Payne, don't you think that, well, I know from experience that almost every single woman in that neighborhood would know about it and would be nosy and asking what the hell is going on? Why, how did he meet a Russian woman? Oh, he defected. Oh my God, he went to Russia? Oh wow, why would he do that? And then some woman's going to go out there and go to the library, or they didn't have the internet back then, but she's going to find an old newspaper article because it's only a few years before, and she's going to find that Oswald defected and tried to give up his secrets. There's going to be a news article about it somewhere, and they're going to come back and they're going to discuss it. Now, they all act like they didn't discuss anything like that. They just discuss babies and diapers and coffee cake and crap like that. That's total bullshit. I know, especially Southern women, how that's going to work. They're going to be patriotic. They're going to say, hey, well, let's not have anything to do. And she's Russian. Oh, she could be a spy. She could be a communist. So none of these women are going to have anything to do with her. And they're going to tell their kids and not let their kids hang out with Oswald or hang out with his wife. Okay? And then they're going to tell Jenny Mae Randall what they found out. And Jenny Mae Randall's going to, tell her brother, that guy's a communist. He's a defector. He ran off to the Soviet Union, and that's how he met his Russian wife. And now her and him are on the outs because he's been hitting her, I mean, there's no way that Mrs. Ruth Payne is not going to see the marks, you know, and not, or they're not going to talk about it, and then she's not going to spread the gossip. I just know how this culture works. So all these people talking about they didn't hear anything and all they talked about was babies and the weather are all full of shit, is what I say. That's just my opinion, but I've been around this type of culture. I know exactly how it works. It's no different than anywhere else. You got a bunch of women that don't have any jobs. All they're doing is raising children and cleaning house. So the gossip machine is going to be cranked into high fucking gear. You know, they're going to want, you know, back then they had soap operas. This is a live soap opera, okay, that they can get into. And there's not one that would not do it, okay? I'm just letting you know how this really works.
And that's where my sister told Miss Payne that yes, they were taking applications. And she, in return, Miss Payne told, there was a lady living with her at that time named Marina, and her husband was Lee Oswald. Is Marina Oswald, and so she told Marina Oswald, and she in turn told Lee that he might go by there and fill out an application if he was still looking for work.
So, do you think that your sister asked you about employment as a result of talking to Marina, or is it something that she just knew from talking with you, and then she told Marina?
Well, the way I recalled, my sister asked me, were they still doing any hiring? And in these meetings or gatherings that sometimes the women would do in that neighborhood, I guess something must have came up about Marina's husband looking for work. And that's where my sister asked me, and then I checked with Mr. Shelley, and he said yes, they were, and the information got back to Marina and Lee through Miss Payne, and Lee came by and filled out an application.
So, when was the first time then that you actually heard of Lee Harvey Oswald? Not that you had seen him, but had heard of him.
Right before he started to work there, my sister told me that Marina's husband was looking for work, but at that time I couldn't tell you what his name was because I never had met the man.
So when did you first learn his name, and that he was in fact going to be working at the depository, or did you?
Well, the first day I met Lee Oswald was the day that he started to work at Texas School Book Depository.
So before that time you had not even heard his name?
No, I did not know his name, or never had the opportunity to meet him.
So how did the meeting take place, and what did you think?
Well, my first meeting with Lee Oswald was that he had reported to the Texas School Book Depository for work.
All right, so let's just get down to some brass tacks facts here. So basically, Oswald left Mexico City around the 2nd, 3rd, and then he arrives back in Dallas on Thursday, October 3rd. Okay? He stays in the YMCA, I believe, until Monday. And on Monday, he gets this first room at this place on Marsalis, which is just right up the street, just a couple of blocks within, maybe a mile of where Ruby is living. Okay? And then he's there for about a week. The landlady hears him speaking in a foreign language on the phone, and she doesn't like that because, like I said, these southern women, they like to gossip, they like to know what the hell is going on, so if you're speaking in a foreign language, she can't gossip in on him and or eavesdrop on him and hear what's going on with him. Okay, so she asked him to leave, and then that Monday, okay, or over the weekend when he went to visit his wife at the Paynes, that's when she told him she had heard about this job. And actually what happened is she heard about the job that they may be hiring. she called and spoke to Mr. Truly and actually made kind of an appointment with Mr. Truly for Oswald on Monday for him to come in and interview. Okay? And then before Oswald went in, he went to the house on Beckley, moved in there, and then went to the interview and got the job, and I believe he started working that day. And then that's when Mr. Truly told Frazier there was going to be a guy starting. You know, all this actually might have happened on Friday, now that I think about it. But no, it's no way, because anyway, somehow Frazier gets told by Mr. Truly there's going to be this guy starting today, and I think they probably started on Tuesday. That's probably what happened. And then Frazier already knew about him because he went home and, he was told by Mr. Truly there's a guy who's going to be starting, and then, his wife is over there, and that's when all this happened like that. So it's very interesting that Mrs. Payne was actually leading all this that was going on. You think about, people say she's just being condemned for being nice, but, think about it. She's going down to New Orleans, encouraging Marina to go with her back to Dallas. Oswald's going to follow her back to Dallas, of course. And then she's arranging for Oswald to help him get a job at the school book depository. Now the thing is that what if Oswald had gone in and not gotten that job? I doubt it very much, because we're going to look at the background of Mr. Truly, and you'll find out that he's totally connected into this same conservative, although he's more on the outskirts of it, this same core conservative group that involves the Hunts, George de Mohrenschildt, General Walker, all this group of ultra-conservative right-wing Dallasites there, okay? So anyways, let's keep going.
Summoned Mr. Shelley and introduced him to Lee, and told him he was there and put him to work. And after talking with him a short time, Mr. Shelley asked that I come to his office, and I did so. And when I reported to his office, he introduced me to Lee Oswald.
See, there you go.
And at that time, he told me that he would like for me to teach him how to fill orders. And I did that.
What was your first impression of him?
So it's interesting that he says a couple of different versions of this, because in one of them, he says that he was told by Mr. Truly about Oswald, and then he saw this new guy working, and he assumed that that was Oswald, and so he approached him and let him know who he was, that, hey, I live in the same neighborhood as your wife. But here he's saying that Mr. Truly brought him to his office, he introduced him to Oswald, and then they put him to work right there. So I find it interesting how Frazier keeps spinning kind of the same version of the story, but he modifies it just a little bit over time.
My first impression of Lee, he was he appeared to, and I later found out that he was a very quiet type person. He wasn't someone that talked excessively, and most of our conversations, matter of fact, all of our conversations, while working, was strictly business. He'd ask me a question.
And see, this is something I find that's interesting, how you'd think that all the people that worked at the school book depository were a bunch of just chatterbox goof-offs, that all they did was sit around, cutting up, making jokes, and goofing off and hardly working at all. the way they talk about the way they are, that's what it seems like. But I grew up in the South. I know how it is. Everybody, works. They stick their nose to the grindstone, and they don't chat a lot. I was always the person that was chatting too much. Okay, the chatterbox. I wouldn't goof off. I did my work, but I did, get, I don't know if you call it reprimanded, but corrected by the bosses several times for chatting too much. You hear them come in there. Usually bosses are screaming when they come in, screaming and yelling, "Everybody stop goofing off and shut up and get to work." But here we have Oswald being just like the people that all my bosses wanted us to emulate. Stop goofing off, stop talking, get to work. I'm not paying you. It's not a damn social club. And because of that, because he's sticking to his work, he is, focused, I guess you could say, on his work, then supposedly he's antisocial and is willing to go out and kill a bunch of people because of that, which I find very, very odd, because I know how Southern culture is, and I know how the bosses are, and they'll come and start yelling at people. I remember one time I had this boss, very, very wealthy, and he owned this bottled water company, and my job was to run around, and they had these water machines, okay, these water dispensers, and we would deliver, the trucks would deliver these big bottles of water to these offices and homes and stuff like that. My job was every day the drivers would get back, and there'd be, a group of people that either weren't paying or weren't answering the door and weren't collecting the bottles. As soon as they saw there were bottles from the last month's delivery or last 2 weeks ago delivery, they would give they'd come back, they'd hold on to the invoice on that, they'd give it to this girl, and this girl would give it to me. Or if it looked like the office was abandoned and the guys have moved and they hadn't paid in a while, they would give it to me. And the first thing I would do is, call all the numbers I had, and then I would go out. That'd be like half a day, and the other half of the day I'd go out and knock on doors. And I had all the spots mapped out, and I would, hit the places. And usually what happens, they would move and they would leave the water machine there. And they'd say, "Hey, we told you 1,000,000 times to come pick up the damn water machine, so we just left it there." So I'd end up having to contact the landlord or the leasing company and make an arrangement to meet them at a certain time so we can go in and get our machine. So during the summers, I would go out there during the day because it was cooler during the mornings before noon, and I'd be in the office in the afternoon. And then during the winters, I'd be out in the afternoon and in the office in the mornings. And just one of these times I was in there, and we had a kind of an open office with these salesmen that would go kind of door to door, and they all had their little offices there. One guy came back, and he was kind of new and didn't know me, and I didn't know him, and I'm sitting there making phone calls, and he comes in and starts chatting, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, okay," and then we're relating about stuff, and maybe just took 2 or 3 minutes, but in that time, my boss, I guess, was in another office nearby, and he could hear us chatting. And so he came in and starts screaming away, "You motherfuckers, get to work. I'm not paying your ass to sit around gabbing. This is not a goddamn bar or social club." And this was in Houston, and this is the way Southern men, bosses, act. Okay? And so from there on, I got like a mileage chart where I was having to write down every stop that I made, and so I could keep track of my work to make sure I wasn't goofing off, you know what I'm saying? And this other guy, I'm sure they kept looking at his sales and stuff like that, and we would see each other after that and just, "Oh, hi, yeah, hey, how's it going? Got to go back to work. I got to go out, got to make phone calls." So that's the way Southern bosses are. I'm sure it's the same way in New York or in Chicago and Florida and California and all that. But that's the way Southern bosses are that I've worked with. Almost every single male boss I've ever worked with at one time or another, you could hear them screaming or yelling. Hopefully not at me. Most of the time it wasn't at me after that. But, that's how you rule by fear and, shut the hell up, get to work, stop goofing off, stop chatting, stop talking. I'm not paying you to chat and talk and bullshit around. But when you read their testimonies, all of them, besides Frazier, it seems like that's all they did. They goofed off, they chatted, they played dominoes, they played cards, and then they filled orders with books. But while they were doing that, they were goofing off and smoking and crap like that. But Oswald never, in some senses, it all depends on your outlook on things, okay? If Oswald never killed the president, okay, but became the most productive employee there and got an award for filling the most orders in 1 month and became Employee of the Month, people would have said, oh, Oswald didn't talk because he stuck to his job. He was a dedicated, hard-working employee. Okay? But because Oswald supposedly is accused of killing the President of the United States, now that same hard work and dedication that he's putting into his work and not goofing off and playing dominoes and, backslapping and bullshitting around, now that's seen as nefarious and that, oh, he's just a cold-blooded killer. So it all just depends on your perspective, okay, and circumstance. And, everybody is 20/20 hindsight. Oh, yeah, he didn't talk that much, so therefore he must have been a psycho killer. And I should have known he looked like the kind of guy that would have killed the president. No, he's just a hard-working guy. That's all he was. Just, what happens later on colors the way we see people when we look back at people, okay?
How did I know the difference between, or what actual textbook were they referring to? And I would show him the difference between one text and another. And I said, when you see this is a copy that they're asking for right here. And he learned very quickly. Seemed to be quite intelligent. And it was a pleasure working with him because he never just asked you a question. It was always he was trying to find or understand. After reading the invoice that he had in his hand, if he had any question, he'd just come find me.
So generally, people's character is the same. Generally, usually. No matter if they're stacking books, working on a radar installation, or in a radio factory in Minsk. Okay? So their work ethic usually is going to be the same at all those jobs, and then you'll see the same thing in their personal life. They'll be and you can tell a lot about a person. I know a lot of people say, well, you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but I do, because generally the way people take care of themselves and their body and whether they're neat, they comb their hair, they take a damn bath, they shave, how they present themselves usually reflects how they work and handle other people's business when they're being paid to do that. Of course, that's a big generalization, but I have 50 years of experience. I found that out. If you got a guy that dresses like a bum, never takes a bath, never hardly ever shaves, he's probably going to do pretty poor at work details and work performance. But if you got a guy who's motivated, focused, hardworking, and is clean shaven, and in his personal habits, he's probably going to be pretty focused in his work. And you see Oswald doing that. And see, this is why I think that Oswald was working as an informant, because he's applying those same skills, trying to understand trying to keep a low profile and listen, okay, and be a soldier and not be a goof off, because when you're being a goof off and running around and backslapping and not paying attention, you're missing things that you can report back on, okay? So this is what I think, this is just speculation, this is what I think is going on, is that Oswald is working for someone. He thinks it's the government. He thinks it's something. Maybe he's been told, okay, there's a few people who want you to watch out for. Keep your ears open and your mouth shut and report back. Just a small thing. You know, this is a small job you've done. You know, I worked with some private investigators when I was in Texas, just for a couple, maybe a year, and I took the same skills I did for tracking down people and hunting down people to get our equipment back for working for a private investigator, and then I moved to Oregon, so I never finished that up and got my license. But they had jobs that they would just, you know, look, we've got a client that wants you to go to work for this warehouse. Keep your eyes open, write down names, and find out certain things, whether it was like who was selling drugs, who was goofing off, who was, you know, faking workman compensation. Just keep your eyes and ears open. And it could either be passive or it could be active. You know, a passive one would just be, I'm working there, being covert, listening, writing down, reporting back what I hear, what I find. Not very active. Active would be, you know, making friends with certain targeted people beyond work, going and finding out more about them, you know, asking them specific questions after you got to know them for a while, and then reporting back what they say. So that's what we did, and this is probably what Oswald is doing. He's been told to watch out, keep an eye out. He thinks he's doing some kind of job for the government or whatever. They're just putting him there, okay, because they know this is where Kennedy's going to be coming by. They're putting the patsy in the place so he can get caught, okay? This is what is going on. This is what I believe is going on, and I think we're going to find more and more evidence like this. Again, evidence is not always going to be a document that says we put Oswald here to make him a patsy, make him a scapegoat. It's going to be more subtle. It's going to be more implied, you see. So if you have someone that is sticking to their work, keeping their ears open, and not goofing off and chatting with people a lot, it could be, he could be antisocial and hates everybody in the world, okay? Or he could be working for someone and he's keeping his eyes open and he's focused and dedicated. You see how Frazier just said that he never asked a question unless it was something he needed to understand. So the same character, the same work ethic follows people no matter where they go. Okay? Same thing. Anyway, we're going to stop here and we're going to go on to the Des Moines Shields. And like I said, the reason why we're going over these videos is Oswald is dead. He can't sit here and give an interview for C-SPAN and we can watch it and find out more about him while they ask questions. So the way you find out about someone who's dead or passed away is to listen to other people talk about them and what their impressions were. And then you can get kind of a better understanding of what that person is like.
He was defending his own country.
All right. Again, this is the George Des Moines Show interview with William Oltmans. This is Dennis Morset's video. He's got a lot of good videos. I really like the primary source videos that you have, where you have the actual voice and words of the people involved, not somebody telling you something, not somebody, spinning something. You're hearing the words come right out of their mouths. Anyway, we'll keep going.
In the United States, he was defending Soviet Russia.
All right, hold on 1 second.
I think he was a useful person and created good feelings for in both countries.
Mm-hmm. You would say, though, from your knowing him in these years, you did not consider him capable of violent acts.
I never considered him capable of violent act.
He did threaten to destroy the toys, but that was, in your view, more a fit of...
Definitely, it's in a fit of anybody can get mad. And don't forget that Marina constantly annoyed him, made fun of him.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Yes. And so
Marina is playing a go-getter. She's pushing his buttons. Because she's wanting what she hears or what she imagines as her version of the American dream. So she's going to get that American dream, whether Oswald gets killed or dies or whatever, goes to prison for killing the president, and she ends up marrying a millionaire, or she's going to push until that happens. She's going to push Oswald as hard as she can to make him live up to her ideals of the American dream. She's a go-getter, okay? Anyway, we'll keep going.
he did strike.
Oh, one more thing. You'd think that Oswald, if he's having these conversations with de Mohrenschildt, that he'd be having these conversations with Frazier about, politics, communism, the Soviet Union, the evils of America, imperialism. You think he'd have these conversations with, people at work. Maybe he's smart enough to know that, hey, the boss, Mr. Truly, is a member of the Birch Society, and maybe it's probably not very smart to be discussing that you're a communist in front of him. And again, I've mentioned this before also. I don't know about you, but I don't know. I've never been on anyone else's job interview except my own. But almost all the job interviews I've ever been on, it goes something like this. So, this is the job we have here, and whether it's collections or call center or whatever. And I'm looking on your resume here, and it says here you worked at Wells Fargo Bank. Tell me about your experience at Wells Fargo and how that applies to this job. And then, boom, I do that, and then go down to the next one below that. You want to list like 3 or 4 of your past relevant experience to the job you're applying. And they would go down the list. So, I don't know if Oswald had a resume, but apparently he had an application. So you were in the Marines. Great. How long were you in the Marines? Okay, 3 years. What did you do in the Marines? Oh, okay. You're a radar operator. Okay, you're a radar operator, but you want to stack books? Isn't that kind of out of your field? Well, I couldn't find anything else. Okay. Well, when did you get out of the Marines? 1959. It's now 1963. What have you been doing since 1959, the last 4 years? Well, I worked at this Riley Coffee Company in New Orleans. Doing what? Oh, I was an oiler. And then what did you do before that? Oh, I worked for this photo company, or this Jager Childs, right up the street actually, developing photos. Oh, okay. And of course, all this is going to be like, well, what did you do there, and why did you leave that position, or what happened to that position? Why aren't you working there now? That's how all my interviews always worked. Okay. And then before Jager Childs, what'd you do there? Oh, I was working at this Leslie Welding Company. Oh, okay. Well, what did you do there? Why aren't you still there? Okay, that's how that conversation would go. And then the next conversation after they went down from there would be, well, what did you do between the Marines in 1959 and Leslie welding company in June of 1963, which is, over 3 years. Oh, I lived in the Soviet Union. Oh, really? What did you do in the Soviet Union? Oh, I was a fake defector. I worked in a radio factory in Minsk. Oh, interesting. So how did you end up in the Soviet Union? Why would you go to the Soviet Union? We're talking about ultra conservative Dallas. And Mr. Truly is an associate of the Birch Society. So how do you think that conversation is going to go? Oh, I left the Marines. I got out early on a hardship to go take care of my mother, but I only stayed there like a couple of days, 3 days, and then I defected to the Soviet Union. You didn't read about it in the newspaper? Here, I even saved a little clip here for you. I even saved a trophy clip of the newspaper clipping. And you threatened to give up your citizenship, and it says here, and to give the Soviets all your secrets, or radar secrets. Well, you're nothing but a goddamn traitor. Get the fuck out of my office. And then Mr. Truly would proceed to grab Mr. Oswald by the back of the fucking shirt on the neck and throw his ass out onto Elm Street and kick him. That's how that reality would come down. But yet, what we have is Oswald being referred there by Mrs. Payne, and after a brief interview, getting hired. Nobody asked Oswald at work, what did you do before you worked here? Where did you go to school? Were you ever in the military? Because a lot of these guys would have been drafted, just like Frazier gets drafted a year later. You got drafted? Were you in the Marines? What did you do after the Marines? You went to the Soviet Union? Don't you think that people would be asking these questions? Don't you think in the domino room when he's sitting there reading the newspaper, hey, Oswald, what did you do before you came here? I know how people are. I've been in these break rooms. People, hey, what's going on? Where are you from? How long you been in Dallas? Oh, you were raised here. Okay, well, you're in the Marines. Oh, okay, what'd you do after the Marines? What'd you do before here? You went to the Soviet Union. Why, that's a communist country, And the whole scuttlebutt would get around everyone in the goddamn office. Before you know it, you got a fucking communist that no one's talking to. And they told Mr. Truly and the other supervisors, and again, Oswald's days are numbered. But nobody asked Oswald any questions. Nobody, Mr. Truly, none of the other, Mr. Shelley, none of the other supervisors seemed to give a damn that Oswald, surely someone's got to remember this defector to the Soviet Union, but nobody does. Isn't it fucking strange? I know they didn't have the internet back then, but people can fucking read. I just find it absolutely 100% strange. And again, you've got Mr. de Mohrenschildt, this wealthy man, hanging out with ultra right-wing, neoconservative, virulent anti-communists. They're so anti-communist they think that J.F. Kennedy is a communist. Okay? But you got Mr. de Mohrenschildt, who's hanging out with these fervent anti-communists. He's Mr. Laissez-faire. Everything's okay. Do what thou wilt. With this communist that he's befriended and hanging out with and talking shit and talking in Russian and talking philosophy. What about the reason why did you go to the Soviet Union? You never hear him say this in this conversation. Oh, he did. He wanted to see what it was like. But Mr. de Mohrenschildt's not stupid. He can read also. He can read that there's a newspaper article out there that Oswald went to the Soviet Union. He was going to give up his American citizenship, give up all his secrets to the Soviet Union, And then, well, why the hell did you come back? If you're going to be a traitor to the United States, why the hell would you come back? And I'll give you an example. Okay? Here's an example. All right, so here's my example. So you got Edward Snowden, who defected to Russia and gave the Russians all our NSA secrets and how we run our computers and how we do our hacking ware and how we do our defense against their hacking. And he gives all the secrets to the Russians. Okay? So one day, after a couple of years, he decides that he didn't like Russia anymore. He's homesick. Maybe his wife there decides she's homesick. She wants to go home, or, either we go back to the U.S. and we face up to whatever you did, and at least we're in the U.S., or we get a divorce. So Snowden says, okay, I guess we got to move back to the U.S. And he moves back to the U.S., and let's just say the highly unlikely scenario that he gets back, the FBI debriefs him, and the Attorney General of the United States decides not to charge him with espionage or violation of his security oaths. They just wave him on through. Okay? Can you imagine? Anyway, no. Mr. Snowden, it's okay. You gave away all our NSA dirty trick secrets and all our NSA systems and how they work and all this classified information that you swore. You took an oath never to, give up those secrets to our enemies, and that's exactly what you did. But it's okay. All is forgiven. We've rewritten our programs, so it doesn't matter what you told them, it won't work anyway, so you're good to go. Here, go find a job someplace. And then Mr. Snowden moves to Dallas. And then in Dallas, he's looking for a job in computers. And he comes along across Mr. Billionaire, who owns the Dallas Cowboys, just like Mr. H.L. Hunt did, or Mr. Hunt did. Mr. Jerry Jones, he goes and gets a job at Mr. Jerry Jones's company, his management company. We call it Jones Oil Company, whatever. And while he's in the interview there with not Mr. Jones, but his HR manager, he's applying for computer systems, whatever, computer systems specialist, the IT guy at Mr. Jerry Jones' corporate headquarters there. And the HR manager says, hey, you got a really impressive resume here. You work for the NSA. You were one of the top guys there. And then it says all the way up to 2013. And it's now 2023. What have you been doing the last 10 years, Mr. Snowden? Oh, well, you didn't hear about this in the news? Okay. I defected to to Russia. I gave them all the NSA software secrets and all the information that I was told that is classified, and I signed security oaths not to give up. I gave that all up to them. And then after I was there for 10 years, my wife decided she wanted to either come back to the United States or we're going to get a divorce, and I didn't want to lose my wife, so I came back to the United States. But all was forgiven because the FBI checked me out and nothing to worry about. Well, regardless of what he told them, the FBI said, do you think Mr. Jerry Jones' fucking HR manager is going to hire someone who betrayed the fucking United States and lived in Russia? And it's not even communist, okay? Do you really think that that's going to happen? He's going to, oh yeah, well great, fantastic, you're hired. When can you start? Your salary is $100,000. Here, let me show you your office down here. Okay? And just say that he does get hired. And he's in his office there, and he's chit-chatting with people, and, I'm working on the computer there in Mr. Jones's office. I'm his marketing guy. And my computer starts messing around, and I call the IT guy, and Mr. Snowden shows up one day at my computer and is trying to fix it. Oh, yeah, I don't know what's wrong with the computer. It got a virus or something. I don't know. It won't save my files or download or something like that. And chit-chatting, oh, well, no problem. Let me just take a look here and we'll get it fixed. Okay, great. Should I go on break, clock out, whatever? No, just take a couple minutes. Okay, great. Wow, you're new around here. I haven't seen you. What's your name? Oh, my name's Mr. Snowden. I'm the IT guy. Oh, okay, great. Yeah. You don't sound like you're from around Dallas. Where'd you live before this? Oh, I was living in Russia. Oh, okay. What were you doing in Russia? Oh, I was betraying my country and giving up all our secrets to our enemies. Oh, okay. And then, well, computer's fixed. Thank you. Okay, have a nice day, Mr. Trader Snowden. Okay. And then guess what? I'm going to go to the break room and I'm going to be chatting with Sally Sue, the secretary, and I'm going to say, hey, you know that new guy, Snowden, the IT guy? Oh, yeah, I know him. He came by and fixed my computer. Well, you better be careful because that motherfucker went to Russia and was passing around secrets. Our secrets. And now he's here. He probably downloaded a virus onto your fucking computer. And the Russians are probably monitoring everything right now. And the Chinese too. Really? And then Sally Sue, she's going to go to the bathroom, or she's going to go to the makeup room, or she's going to go after work to the bar down the street and be chatting with all the other girls in the office. And before you know it, within a week, Mr. Snowden, no one's going to be talking to Mr. Snowden. Okay? Because they're going to all know him as a fucking traitor to the United States or giving up our secrets. And then eventually it's going to filter upward to Mr. Jerry Jones, and Mr. Jerry Jones is going to come down and fire Mr. Snowden's ass. He's going to bring his security guards. They're going to throw Mr. Snowden through the front fucking doors. Okay? That's how reality is in America. But yet, we have Oswald, and it's much worse time back then. They're willing to kill the president of the United States because they believe he's a communist in Dallas. But yet you got a communist who gave up secrets, betrayed his country, and yet he's able to get a job anywhere. And nobody picks a fight with him, says anything derogatory about him. Nothing. It's quite bizarre. Okay, I'll just switch it and I'll say, hey, what if Oswald was a child molester? In 1963, Oswald he goes to Mr. Truly and says, oh, what have you been doing the last 4 years? Oh, I was in prison down in Huntsville. Oh, what were you in prison for? Oh, I was convicted of child molestation. Well, damn, I'm not having you working in this fucking building, even though there's no children here. We send out books to children. He'd make some kind of connection, and then he would take Mr. Oswald, grab him by the shirt collar, and throw and kick his ass out onto Elm Street. That's exactly what would happen. Okay? But yet, Oswald, this communist who betrayed his country, nothing happens. He's able to work there a month. Nobody says a word. It's very bizarre. It wouldn't happen today. I doubt it would have happened anywhere else in 1963. Anyway, I'm sorry for ranting, but that is just the reality of what we're looking at. All right, so we're going to stop here for a second. All right, we're going to switch gears, go back into the Constitution. How Oswald's rights were denied. Like I said, I've come to the conclusion that Oswald, if he had survived, would have gone to trial. There probably would have been some kind of shenanigans, witnesses dying, witnesses changing their stories, evidence disappearing, and that Oswald probably would have been convicted. And that he probably would have been released if he had survived prison upon appeal. but I doubt he would have made it even that far. All right, hold on a second. All right, so we're going to go into, we talked about the Constitution, now we're going to talk about the Bill of Rights, and the most important part is the sixth article of the Bill of Rights. It says, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effect against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. No warrants shall issue, but upon probable cause, supported by oath or from affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Now, a good lawyer could have a field day with this, okay? Because Oswald left his personal effects in Mrs. Payne's garage. Now, I guess it could be argued that he gave up his rights to have these articles not seized because he left them at Mrs. Payne's. And also, anything he had in his room, because he was renting a room, there's a good argument there that he didn't have rights because he didn't own the property. But there have been other cases later that have affirmed the right of people just renting an apartment or renting a room, that you need a separate warrant for that, not just the okay of the landlord to search that person's property. Anyway, so here we have Oswald, his personal papers, his effects, everything seized by the government without a warrant. They realized they were going to need a warrant, so they went back and got a warrant, even though Mrs. Payne allowed them to search, because they knew that what could possibly happen is that even though they had seized all these personal items in Mrs. Payne's garage per her permission, they quickly realized, the DA, that Oswald, if he had a good attorney, could have all that, anything, and they didn't know what they had, could have any and everything that the police seized thrown out in a case or upon appeal, because the constitutional rights of Oswald had been violated. Anyway, we'll keep going here. That's a major important one, though. Now, the seventh article of the Bill of Rights is even more important. It says, no person shall be held to answer for a capital crime, which is what this is, or otherwise infamous crime, which is what this is, unless on presentment of an indictment of a grand jury. Oswald never got even close to a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land and naval forces or in the militia, when actual service in time of war or public danger shall be any person be subject to the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor to be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. There's a lot in that article right there that's used constantly today. So this would be a capital case, okay? Oswald basically is being compelled to testify to the police about his supposed crime, even though he doesn't have to, but he's ignorant, doesn't know that he doesn't have to, and therefore they're holding off getting him a lawyer, okay, because they want him to keep sweating and talking, and hopefully they can get something out of him. But of course, nothing ever comes out of it. And I think that's really what's going on. The clock is ticking, okay? Mr. Loeb, or whatever his name is, this lawyer that he wants, is at the mountain cabin in New York and not answering the phone. They know they've got, it's Friday afternoon when he's arrested. They know they've got till Monday morning, maybe. This is why Oswald is killed on Sunday, not Monday morning. Okay? And so they're using that time to sweat Oswald out. And then when they realize that Oswald is not giving them anything new they can use, and that he doesn't have access to the lawyer, eventually he's going to figure it out and stop talking. So this is why they've got to get rid of him. Okay? Anyway, so it says, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Well, if anything, Oswald was completely deprived of his life and his property and his liberty, and never, ever got his due process of law. He wasn't brought before court. He wasn't indicted by a grand jury. He wasn't able to face his accusers, present his evidence and witnesses to a jury, and let a jury of his peers decide. None of that. All that was taken away from him. And again, all that was taken away because they realized that Oswald wasn't going to break. They realized that they had problems with no fingerprints of Oswald on the rifle, no powder on his cheek, showing that he, that he fired the rifle. They realized they had a problem. So this is just another way of them finagling to deprive Oswald of his due process of law. Anyway, keep going here. Here's another one. The 8th article of the Bill of Rights. It says, in criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall be deemed committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witness against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. So it says right here, he never got his public trial. He was murdered. There was no impartial jury. He never got to get to that. The district where the crime was committed, that was taken away when the FBI seized the evidence, and then the president formed this committee out of the district. Because, see, in all essence, everything still should have happened in Dallas County. But all that was taken away by a presidential decree. So you have the President of the United States, the new President, Johnson, covering up for his accomplices in the crime. And it says here, to be confronted with witnesses against him. Okay, the only time he was confronted with witnesses against him was in the lineups, the unfair lineups, and to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have assistance of counsel or for his defense. He never was able to get to a jury trial, to bring his own witnesses or evidence, to confront witnesses and the state's evidence, or have any kind of legal assistance. Just because someone is ignorant of the law and doesn't know that he needs assistance doesn't mean the state is not obligated to provide him with assistance, which is what they never did. Anyway. And then the 10th article. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel or unusual punishments inflicted. So, this eventually becomes the 18th Amendment. So I really think that Oswald would have had a good chance, because there's no fingerprints, there's no paraffin tests, to have gotten bail. It would have been really high, but I think he would have been able to have gotten bail, possibly. No cruel and unusual punishments. And if you think about that, the most cruel and unusual punishment is that he was murdered in front of all the TV cameras. Let's see what else we have here. All right, hold on a second. All right, so we're going to finish that And then next time we come back at the end here, we're going to talk about the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, how similar it is to the assassination of John F. Kennedy and all the things that occurred in there. All right, take care. Bye-bye.